Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, dear ladies and gentlemen. Nothing is as we know it anymore. COVID-19 makes previous knowledge of tourism demand obsolete. Changing tourist flows, travel decisions and spending, customer preferences, growth segments, only slowly it is becoming more clear what the new global travel world looks like. Welcome to our third ITB Virtual Convention on Market Trends and Thought Leadership in Global Tourism. Our session today will provide you an update on global tourism demand in times of COVID-19, as we have named it. Before we start our keynote, I would like to give you a few organizational tips. First of all, the ITB also stands for networking in Corona times. As you have seen on the ITB Virtual Convention website, we want to give you the opportunity to network. Just a quick reminder for those of you who want to participate in our first ever virtual convention speed networking event during the break from 2:30 to 2:45 p.m. Please make sure you're logged into your ITB Travel Network profile now and are watching this session on there. The link is itb.com/network. As always at ITB Convention, we would like your needs. Therefore, we have set up a Slido poll. In a few seconds, you will see the question on the right-hand side of the screen. Also, during today's presentation, you, dear audience, are again cordially invited to ask questions to our speakers and also to like the question of other viewers via our tool Slido under the Q&A button. At the end of the speakers will answer the most popular questions. But let us first come to our Slido poll. Which of the following statements do you agree with? For your company, the uncertainty of the development of demand is option A, a major problem, option B, a big problem, option 3, a normal problem, and option 4, no problem. Dear ladies and gentlemen, please vote now if you haven't done yet. We will see your vote in a few seconds. We are excited to see your opinion. Maybe it takes a short while until we see it. Okay, then now let's come to our first speaker. I would like to announce and introduce Mrs. Claudia Kramer. She's the Director of Market Research at Statista. Statista, the renowned global market research company and statistics portal, is our keynote partner for this session. And we soon start the keynote presentation from Claudia. But first of all, I would like to see the results of your So, yeah, maybe we'll have a look at it a little bit later. I assume that most of you say it's a bigger problem. It's not a normal problem for us. So let's not have a look at the statistics and the results, but I would like to hand over now to Claudia. Claudia, we are looking forward to your keynote speech. The screen is yours, Claudia, please.
Thank you very much for the warm welcome, and I'm very delighted to present some very current data and news regarding the global tourism industry today. Just as a short introduction about myself, I'm Claudia Kramer, the Director of Market Research at Statista Research and Analysis, and next to some fun facts on the left and right, on the bottom you can see my career path so far. I started in 2008 at the GfK television audience research. before I started at Kantar in 2011 in the consumer and retail sector, especially in the advertising and brand research, also covering some global travel brands. And now leading the primary market research team at Statista, where we conduct primary market research and individual client projects. I brought a really brief introduction about the background of our data and the figures that I will present. Then we will look at the status of the global tourism industry before digging a little bit deeper into some regional differences and also individual market segments. At the end, of course, we have some conclusions and hopefully some time for questions maybe from your side that you can enter into the system also. Starting with the introduction, some key facts about Statista. If we would start with some numbers, we have roughly 900 employees up to date, and were founded in 2007 in Hamburg in Germany, but now have offices around the world. We rely our platform and all the data analysis that we do on over 22,500 data sources and data partnerships that we have. But we also survey over 1 million people a year for our own research and client projects. And on the platform, we currently have roughly 23,000 corporate clients that use our portal as a data source. But we are much more than a statistics portal, and I hope that I can demonstrate a little bit of our expertise today. On the one hand, of course, we do have our big business portal with lots of secondary data and third-party sources. But on the platform, we today have a lot of our own calculations, our own created data, our models to size markets around the globe. And that's what we do in Statista Research and Analysis Department, where my team and I, as the primary market research team, are part of also, where we conduct individual projects. And not least, we do have our own content marketing and information design department that understands to put all the data into visually appealing infographics, videos, story charts, microsites, booklets, or corporate publishings also. So this is kind of the Statista world in three columns. What we know about the tourism industry is, on the one hand, summarized in all the dossiers and reports that you can find on the platform. So I would highly invite everyone who hasn't had the chance yet, but maybe will do in the future, to have a look at our platform and look at everything there is on the tourism industry. There's quite a lot. And in these dossiers, we gather all the secondary data that we can find that is freely available or that we have access to through our data partnerships, but also our own calculations and figures. Our own calculations and figures we gather mainly from one of the world's biggest global consumer survey that we do in 55 countries up to date, and have over 700,000 interviews so far, around 50 markets and industries, and one is also the travel and tourism industry that we cover, where we ask the consumers about their travel behavior, about attitudes, etc. Last but not least, based on the Global Consumer Survey, but also secondary data, we have our expert tool, the Mobility Market Outlook, where travel and tourism is one big asset that we look at, where we calculate the market and also forecast the figures for up to 5 years. So this is, I find important because I want to be transparent where the data that we will look at now, where that is coming from. So we have a lot of secondary data, third-party sources, but also our own calculations and input from the Global Consumer Survey, for example. I do have some methodology background on the Mobility Market Outlook. I will not go into detail because this would definitely bring me over time. But I think important is to point out that when we look at the travel and tourism market in our MMO, as we call it, we have 4 segments that we look at, and that's the package holidays, the hotel stays, the private vacation rentals, and the cruises segment. And all these 4, they build together, they build the Mobility Market Outlook based on different sources. So at the end, when you can download the presentation or have a look on the ITV website, you can go into more detail regarding all the methodology. Now I would like to jump into the content and look at the status of the global tourism industry today and as we have seen it in the past. And looking at the timeline starting from 1950, we can see that there has been a yearly growth and a steady increase in the importance of the tourism industry. Here you can see the worldwide tourist arrivals per year in millions, and there has been a great growth over the past decades and a really high importance of the industry overall. Also, looking at the contribution of the tourism industry to the GDP in selected countries, we see that also the tourism industry has a high relevance for the economies in each country, and especially here in the Asian markets, but also in many European countries and China also, and different regions where the tourism industry is a great provider of economic health and growth. So this may be to summarize where the tourism industry stood before the COVID-19 pandemic came into place, and to show you what we, from our own calculations in our Mobility Market Outlook, what we forecasted before the pandemic for the travel and tourism revenue worldwide was a revenue of $767 billion for this year. But now, due to the pandemic, we forecast only less than half, so $349 billion revenue worldwide. So this shows that the current situation really has a huge impact on the global tourism market with this great decline. Of course, this is mostly driven by the travel warnings and the travel bans, the international borders being closed, and also it will highly depend on the effect on the household budgets, on the economic situation, how that will develop over the next weeks and months and maybe even years, and also how the government will subsidize these industries. So these are different impact factors. but we believe that there will be a high impact, negative impact this year. So looking at the timeline starting from 2017 to 2025, we see, we saw a steady growth before the pandemic, and now you can see the drop in 2020 that we forecast in our MMO. Very roughly, we predict that the revenues and also the number of travelers will be back on track as we forecasted it before the pandemic by 2025, where the level will be reached that we forecasted before the pandemic. But the first growth, if you take the numbers from last year, we will see in 2023, where the numbers will be slightly above last year's figures. Also, a great growth we see for the online generated revenues in the travel and tourism sector, while the offline generated revenues will decline, and the online shares in the dark blue, they will even exceed the overall market growth. The overall market growth is forecasted with 3.5% growth until 2025, and the online generated revenues will grow by more than 5%. To summarize this, we saw, or we currently see 2/3 of the revenues coming from online channels, and this will grow to 70% in 2025. Sorry about that. So now we will jump to the regional differences. Of course, there are some countries that are more affected than others, and we will now look at some of these differences. Here you can see selected destinations that are the trending travel destinations, as we call them. Those are the ones with highest internal tourism revenues, and internal tourism revenues are the ones generated by domestic and also inbound international tourists throughout the year. And we see here that the countries with the highest internal revenues are US, China, Germany, and India. If we look at the year-to-year growth rates that we predict from 2019 to 2023 in these trending travel destinations, then we can see that all countries will see a huge drop this year in 2020. But also we see that we predict fast recovery, a quick growth again in 2021. Of course, assuming in our model that there will be no second total lockdown. So we believe that the growth can be seen again in 2021. Sorry. And the countries that will lose most will also be the ones with highest growth rates. On this slide, you can see the shares of the domestic in the blue and the international in the very dark blue or almost black columns. Of the total internal tourism revenues in these trending travel destinations that we've seen before. and they're ranked by their revenues overall. And here on the left-hand side, you see the 2019 figures, where it's the internal tourism revenues. So the domestic shares are quite high. And on the right-hand side, you see the 2020 forecasted figures, where you can see that the domestic shares even increase. The international travel is affected more by the current situation than the domestic travel, of course. And now comparing the 2020 figures on the left with our forecast to 2023, we can then see that the international shares will then grow again because we assume that the borders will be reopened and the long-haul travel will be coming back. So and also by 2023, we expect that China will overtake the US in the total internal tourism revenues, and also that Mexico will overtake Australia for the first time. On the top here, you see the domestic internal tourism revenue with the growth rate from 2019 to 2023 in the blue columns, and the dark columns 2020 to 2023. And on the bottom, we see the international growth rates for these periods. And we can see that the international growth rates, the bottom is higher than the columns at the top, than the domestic growth rates. That is due to the higher impact of the pandemic on the international tourism this year. So we predict that over time the growth rates for international will be higher, meaning that the domestic growth will be slower than international tourism. Now, last but not least, we will look at some individual market segments. As I said, these four segments are the ones that we look at in our mobility market outlook. It's cruises on the very bottom, the blue line, the green is the vacation rentals, the red line is the package holidays, and the yellow one is the hotel bookings. And here, looking at the 2020 figures and the drop rates, we can see that the cruises segment is affected the most with the highest drop in revenues, while hotels and also vacation rentals are affected a little bit less. Also looking at the development of the online sales shares, we can see that there will be growth for the online sales shares in all the segments, and offline will decline except in the cruises segment. The cruises segment is one where we see quite high offline shares still because of the target group and also the nature of the travels, because there's many things to think about and many factors that need to be discussed often with someone in person. And very last, before coming to the conclusion, we look at have a brief look at the luxury tourism industry, and we see here the internal overall figures or the growth rates from 2019 to 2023. In the light blue, and in the dark blue, we see the luxury segment growth rates for this period. We see that for the luxury segment, there will be higher growth for this period in really every country with some differences, but especially China will see really good growth for the luxury segment. which is not as much affected as the other segments that we have seen so far. So that is one segment that can maybe relax a little bit. Now coming to the conclusions. We have seen, firstly, that there is a great importance and continuous growth of the industry since 1950. Secondly, we saw that COVID-19 has a dramatic impact on the travel and tourism market and will roughly halve revenues in 2020. We also saw that online booking shares will exceed the total market growth until 2025. And we see that international tourism is expected to recover fast and show first growth again in 2023 compared to last year's figures. Domestic tourism shows lower drops this year than the international segment, but will then slower grow until 2023. Also, we saw, last but not least, that the cruises segment is hit the hardest, looking at the different segments, while the luxury tourism is expected to be less affected. And that leads me to see if there are any questions from your side, and of course also to say thank you and get in touch if there are any questions left open after this, or if you have any questions regarding our data and the figures, then I'm happy to answer all the questions and look forward to hearing from you.
Claudia, thank you very much for these valuable data that we have seen. There are indeed some questions from our audience. Let's pick the first one, which is highly ranked, from Siani. Siani writes, do you have any insights about changing travel demands for long-haul travelers?
The long-haul travelers we would also see in the international figures, the development of the international tourism segment, and we, as I said, we see that that will develop or see first growth signs compared to last year's figures again in 2023. And we expect to be back on track as we forecasted pre-COVID by 2025.
Very hard to estimate due to the bans that we very often experience, flight restrictions and so on. There is a second question coming from Anonymous. Do you have any figures? Oh no, sorry. There is one more question, a little bit higher ranked, from Johan. Oops, now it changed. Let me see. Yeah, here it is. Based on which information you are assuming that the tourism sector will go back to the old development curve in 2023?
Well, we've seen that the old curve is forecasted to be reached again in 2025. There will be first signs of growth again compared to last year's figures by 2023. But that, as I said, that assumes that there will be no second complete lockdown and no international worldwide bans and border closes. Of course, within our predictions until 2025, there's a lot of uncertainties and will highly depend on the development of the pandemic and of the world economic, of course. But we have taken into consideration the economic developments overall and the assumptions that of course, this pandemic will have an effect on economic growth and wealth of the people and travelers overall.
Okay, thanks, Claudia. Now we start to run out of time. Thanks very much, Claudia, for these very insightful presentation and valuable facts and figures. I just had a look at the poll results. There was a technical problem that I was facing, and this showed us that 94% of the audience regard the uncertainty as a major or big problem. So this is what we really assumed. We hope that we could solve this problem a bit. We are very glad you were able, Claudia, to join us today, and we hope to have you back soon. Thanks very much once again.
Thank you very much.
Welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, we are always trying to improve. Please take a short moment to let us know how satisfied you were with this session and answer the following questions that you can answer when it is shown. And now the time has come for our first ever virtual convention speed networking event. Everyone that has been watching this session through the ITB Travel Network, it's time to chat with your matches. We hope you have fruitful conversations now. Everyone else, please enjoy your break. We'll see you back here for our next two sessions at 3 p.m. sharply.